Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to SwiftSlots. Now in this video I'm going to be building my very first George Turner 1/32 scale resin slot car kit. Now I wasn't familiar with George's range of products, so I gave him a ring, and it turns out that we share quite a lot of history between our previous employers and work colleagues within the model car industry. So with that extra layer of dimension on this car, gives it a little bit more of a personal feel for me, because I kind of have connections to the guy that made this car, sort of ish. So with that said, let's get you on my table and show you this beautiful 1930s Bentley kit from George. Okay, so let's take a really close look at this beautiful Bentley from George Turner Models. Now I think the name is called an Embiricos Bentley, but I am struggling with that name a little bit, so apologies if I get it wrong. But look at the quality of that casting. It's absolutely spot on. The modelling is beautiful, the casting is beautiful, and the model itself is absolutely beautiful. Zero complaints whatsoever. I really am in awe of what George does. The quality of his models are absolutely superb, as I'm sure all of you guys that have built his models already know. But say, I'm new to George's models, so this is all new to me, so all new and quite exciting. So the length of it is actually 150mm, or roughly 6 inches, and the width is approximately 60mm, or about 2.25 inches, and the height of the body at least is 45mm, or about 1.75 inches. And it's absolutely stunning. Now the windows do need just pushing out. This is a very, very thin amount of resin here, so it will not cause a problem for getting those windows out with a sharp scalpel. And the rest of the body needs very little work indeed, I'm sure. And the inside is also super clean and will need very little cleaning up, if any at all, to be honest. Now I will be doing a couple of little tweaks to this model, and I have run it past George, and George is of the opinion that it's my model, I've paid for it, so it's mine to do what I want with. So I'm going to be removing these bonnet straps because I want mine to be a civilian car, not a racing car. And I'm also going to remodel the rear spats that go in the rear wheels. Now George, I think, did used to have the model with the spats in, but this is the latest casting and the old spatted version isn't available anymore. So I'm going to model those spats back in, and I've got some actual information on the real car to be able to copy the spats again. So that's something that I will be doing with it. So you don't just get the body, obviously, you also get other parts, and I will show them to you now. So if you've got a body, you're going to need a chassis. And here is the very basic chassis to go underneath the main car. As you can see, it's very clean and very simple, very nicely done. And this car actually comes with a pod as well. It's very, very cool. I believe this particular part is 3D printed. It doesn't look cast resin at all. I'm pretty sure it's 3D printed. In fact, I'm almost 100% positive it is. So it's good and tough and will be very durable. Also, you obviously get an interior. And here is the interior here. Very nicely defined. Very, very nice interior indeed. You also get a driver figure, and here he is here. Now again, I'm going to be changing this a little bit because I don't want a racing car, I want a civilian car. I'm going to try and find a 3D printed head from my little stash of Ron's 3D printed figures. I'm going to see if I can find a nice head that fits this guy. Failing that, I'm going to go on the hunt for a vintage figure with a hat on, because I think a guy driving with a hat would look really cool. I know he's got a hat now, but that's actually a racing helmet, and I actually want kind of like a brimmed hat with a sort of 30s and 40s style. Look really cool. And then you get this tree of parts here. So obviously steering wheel, front grille, I assume some sort of lights and some filler caps and some bumpers, I believe, and another little filler cap there or whatever, but that will all become very apparent when I start making it. And you also get a vacuum formed glass, which is very, very nicely done. Everywhere it needs to be perfectly smooth and shiny, it absolutely is, with no problems whatsoever. So that will fit very nicely in the body, I'm sure. You also get this little fittings pack as well. Now obviously there's some body screws in there, and there does appear to be a pair of bearings for the rear motor pod. And there's also these bits here, which I'm not entirely sure what they are just yet. I assume there's something to do with the lights on the front of the car, not sure. And there's a little tiny lens in there as well, which is obviously going to be part of the lights. But there isn't two lenses in there, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. Not entirely sure. Anyway, that will all become apparent as I make the kit as well. Okay, just for completeness, this is Rob coming to you from the future. That is the lens there that I could see in the packet loose, and this is the lens bezel that it belongs in. This is the other lens bezel that I could see, and it actually had the lens in it from shaking around inside the packet. So it's two bezels and two lenses as you would expect, and both of these items appear to be 3D printed. And last but not least, you get a set of water slide transfers. Now I won't be using many of these apart from the number plate, but they come with the kit anyway, and they're very nicely designed and they look very, very high quality indeed. Obviously designed for a race car with number 12. I should just be using the number plates. So there are a number of parts that you need to complete this kit that aren't sold with the kit, one of which is a motor. So I've got this Pendle Slot AC4 20,000 RPM motor. And that will fit this cradle absolutely perfectly and be a really nice match for this car, because I do not need this car to be a speed demon. I just want it to be a nice running car with a good usability. I don't need it to go fast. So that standard motor will be absolutely perfect. Oh, and note, it's also driven from the plastic end bell. That's quite important because the motor pod is driven from the motor end bell. The motors are end-to-end dependent, so when you buy a kit, just make sure you get the motor that's driven from the correct end. So in this case, it is the plastic end. And just because I want to show off a little bit, I'm going to fit a metal pinion gear. It's a lovely little pinion gear in steel. It's AS003 and it's by All Slot. I've used these gears before. They work really, really nicely and they're not expensive. You also need to supply yourself with your own crown gear, so for that I've chosen a G128BZ slotted crown gear in 28 tooth, standard offset in brass. And that will match the car very nicely indeed from a performance point of view. Now I've also bought some bearings, because I didn't realise that this car comes with bearings, or at least appears to, so I bought some in hand. Now initially I bought these Slotting Plus bearings, but having read the packet, it says for a Reynard 2KQ, and I'm not entirely sure now in hindsight whether these bearings are actually going to fit, but anyway, that's reference number SLPL-1015. So just in case they don't fit, I got a really nice pair of reliable ABO1 Pendle Slot bearings, double flanged, and I'm sure that if those bearings don't fit, these ones will. And this car also needs a pair of axles, front and rear, so I'm just going to go to my standard issue hardened axles, and these particular ones are from SRP, again available on Pendle Slot Racing, and they are part number 02817, and I buy these as a pack of 10 and they're 75mm long, and I just chop them down to what I need per kit, and I find buying a pack of 10 a lot more cost effective than just buying a pair at a time. Obviously costs a little bit more money, but when you make as many kits as I do, pack of 10 works out a bit better, and these axles are excellent quality. And you knew it was coming, I'm going to fit a standard Slotting Plus guide to my car, because they're fantastic guides and I love them a lot. So that's going in. And fortunately for me, this car requires these beautiful Pendle Slot Racing spoked alloy wheels. They are absolutely fantastic and I love these wheels. It's part number 3219237S, and they also come with a set of double and triple lugged wheel spinners. I love these wheels. They're fantastic, very high quality, and really add a lot of quality to any model you fit them onto. Now unfortunately for me, I've made a slight mistake. Because I'm going to make rear spats on my particular car, you're sadly not going to see these wheels underneath the body, but I'll know they're there, and as my cabinet making lecturer once told me, you know it's there and God knows it's there, so therefore it's right. So even though you won't see them, I and God will know that they're under that body and looking absolutely stunning. Now also, as a little extra, when I was chatting to George on the phone before I bought this kit, he actually gave me this very nice resin base to put my model on when it's finished. And this is going to look absolutely fantastic. There's a lovely little etched plate in the corner there with his logo on and everything. Looks really, really nice. So thank you very much, George, for that. This is a really, really nice piece. So while I was chatting to George on the phone about this whole kit and then this piece here, he was saying that you can buy a box on eBay to hold this model. Now he assured me that I could find a box exactly the right size for this model, and I did go hunting quite hard and I couldn't quite find one that matched exactly to the size of his base. So I ended up getting one that's a little bit too big. It's about, I don't know, maybe 1/4 inch too narrow per side, so about 1/2 inch too narrow and about 1/2 inch too long. So when I come to making this base, I'll trim it down on the front and add a little bit on the sides and I'll paint it all in, you'll never know. But beautiful base. So if you did buy one of these cars from George, talk to him about these bases, because I'm not sure whether he's actually managed to get them all on his website yet, but he did say that I could mention them, and he has got a few of these now ready to go. So just have a chat with him if you fancy one. But they're really, really nice, and they really bring an extra level of dimension to your model when you finish building it and you want to put it in a case. And I say, the cases come from eBay. They're about £12 or $13 delivered. They're not expensive, and you can find one to fit this, more or less. So that's the whole model all laid out for you to see, and I've explained all the parts that we're going to use in this model, so it's now time to go to the bench and start to build this model. Okay, so I've studied this body in great detail, and I've also been on Google and I've found a real life car to copy. Now you should never model a model from another model, because the model that you're going to copy may well have mistakes, and you're probably going to creep in a couple of mistakes of your own. So by the time you finish the actual model itself, you're going to end up with something that could be quite a long way away from where it ought to be. So always best to find a real life car, a car in this case, to follow. And I've done exactly that. Now my original vision for this car was not a racing car, i.e. the straps. So I found a real life car that's got all the attributes on it that I actually want. So when I get this car finished, it will be an accurate representation of at least what I've seen as a real car on the internet, albeit not quite this variant. So those modifications that I want to make to this body are as follows. These little recesses here are actually little trims for a grille. Now this particular model doesn't have the grille modelled on the front, so I'm going to chop those holes out and I'm going to put in some very fine brass mesh into those holes as they are in real life. Now those holes are actually represented on the back of the car, and they do actually have nice grilling in them with some nice rivets around the outside. So they are correct. But again, that grilling is going to come out and be replaced by proper grilling, and I shall probably end up putting little rivets around the front of these as well so they match the rear ones nicely. So that's one job, is to open up those holes. The next job is to remove these bonnet straps. Now I did say to George that I was going to do this, and he did say, well, it's your car, do what you want, but oh, isn't it a shame to lose his nice work? Well, yes, it is a shame to lose his nice work because these are beautifully modelled, but it's not my vision, and at the end of the day, he can always squirt a new body in about 30 minutes. It's not really a problem, and he said he didn't mind me taking them away anyway. So they're going to have to be removed as well. Also, we've got the bonnet air scoop here, which is in the open position. Now, to be honest, I really want that closed. So I'm going to have to chop that triangle out, make a new triangle with an under piece to go on the inside, and then drop a new triangle in so I maintain the body line. So that's got to be closed. Also, we've got these bars on the side here. Now, I'm not entirely sure what they are. I think they might be drop down arms for indicators like we used to get on the old C pillars of some cars. I'm not sure. They're chrome in real life and they're flush to the body. So these are a little bit stand out, which I'm not sure is quite accurate, but it doesn't matter. But they are not present on the model that on the real car that I'm actually following, so I can remove those as well. Also, the car that I'm following does indeed have both of those rear lights, so both of those can stay, but in some versions of this car that I've seen, it only has one, but I'm safe, I can leave those there. Also, I'm going to be filling up these two body holes here because there's a bumper that's got to go there, and I'm going to play around with the bumper on the chassis with some carbon fibre rod, and I'm going to make my own front bumper as well, because the bumper that comes with this kit is a little bit different from what I want. Also, there's a rear bumper to go on as well, but that will be later on in the video. So for now, we're going to open up those grill holes, remove these straps, close the air scoop, and I'll remove these what I think could be side repeater arms, indicator arms. Also, we've got to fit in 2 indicators on the bottom of these front wheel arches. That's another feature that the car that I'm following has actually got. So we should end up with something vaguely accurate to a real life car and a little bit different from the standard model that George has made. So let's get on with it. Let's do this really fine fiddly work and start ripping into this poor unsuspecting body, get all the modifications done that I want, and also pull out all these windscreens and just go around and clean up the underside of the body. Okay, so some time has passed now and I've done all my little bits of sanding and filing and carving to my personal satisfaction, and I would just like to say that 99% of the work that I've done is not needed. It's mostly a personal choice on the look of this car, because as I said, I'm going for a look of a real car and I'm copying a real car exactly, and it's not quite the same as the version that George has made here. So I think George has made more or less a racing version and I'm making a road version, so there are differences. So the first thing that I've done, obviously is usual for most resin kits, there's a couple of tiny little air bubbles along this edge here, almost nothing. I've just put a spot of filler in those. Next, I filled in this piece of this dip here that's in the front bodywork, and that dip is to make allowances for this spotlight here. Now I think this could be a racing version as well, and a little dip in there to allow for that light. But I'm putting the light back in the grille where it came from, as you can see there, and that's a topic for later on, and I'm going to make a light to go in there, but that light there is coming off, so therefore I can fill in that little dip there. It's not needed. When I eventually get round to it, there'll be a number plate sitting down here, and I'll make my own front bumper as well, so that can disappear. It's fine. I've also cut out the 2 holes in the front for the lights because this car's going to be lit, so is the front grille. I've also cut out these air intakes because I've got some very fine meshing to go in there, and I've thinned out the body in the back ready to take that meshing. That'll probably need to be thinned a little bit more. Then moving along, biggest change, as you can see that my 2 bonnet straps have gone. This is a very, very fine job. I had to try and carve around this bonnet hinge to make sure that I didn't dislodge any of that bonnet hinge. If I had done, I could have always filed it all off and put some 0.3D section down there again to replace it, but I was careful enough and I didn't actually manage to remove any of it at all. So obviously with the straps gone off the top, the straps had to come off the sides, which meant I had to carve the louvers back in where the strapping went. So this is why it's stained pre-black. So that I've got a datum or a reference for when I'm carving to make sure that I'm not taking away too much or too little. Also to pre-black these vents for when I prime it, because the theory is the airbrush won't go into these little grooves very easily. So if they're pre-blacked, the primer won't go in there particularly easily, and nor will the body color. So those louvers will automatically be a darker shade of black, hopefully, when the whole car is finished, and I won't really need to go back in there with any stain. If I do, it'll only be to just have to touch it up a little bit. So that's pre-stained for 2 reasons, one for paint and one so I've got a guide for carving. So I've done it on the both sides there, you can see, and also I've had to recarve in the bonnet line as well, so that was very easy. And the way that I do my carving, I've shown this tool before, but I'll show it to you again. It's not really a tool, I suppose it is now. It's just a hacksaw blade that I've got, and I've ground the end down so it's 0.2 of a mil on this edge here, and basically a point on this edge here. And as you can see, I've hooked this piece here so I can use that hook really sharp, and I've just flattened the end of it on this side here with a slight concave cut on the grinder. And basically all I did when I reinstated these louvers is I just used that edge to just go in and then just carve the louvers back in, and obviously then I was able to carve the bonnet line back out with the other side as well, just with this, because it's hardened steel, it's good quality steel, and then when you sharpen it up, and you can make all sorts of tools from it. Like I said, that's 0.2 of a mil wide. Just measure it on the vernier and put it on the grinder and grind it away. Really easy. So that's the bonnet straps all gone. Moving on to the next section. These pieces of detail on the side here, I wasn't sure what they are, I still don't really know, but they've both gone, and they were just a little bit below the surface of the body, so I put a tiny bit of body filler in there just to smooth that off. Now it's perfect and gone. I've also put a little bit of body filler on the bottoms of these wheel arches here, because when you put the chassis on, they form part of the chassis, and although the fit was extremely good, I was just looking for that extra 2% to make it absolutely perfect, the contour. So there's a little bit of filler, as you can see, basically nothing at all. That's how good the fit was anyway. I just wanted to get it that last 2%. So that's that. I've also gone around all the windows, cleaned them all up, and put a little tiny bit of filler on the insides where necessary, so the edges are nice and smooth. I've also taken away the windscreen wipers and put a little tiny fillet of filler in the corners, because I find the windscreen wipers, they don't look too convincing on any model when they're molded into the body, but also they can disrupt the actual shape of the windscreen, which they had done on this model. So I put a little tiny bit of filler in the bottom corners and reinstated that nice curve to match the top. And that's how it is in real life, and with some separately made brass windscreen wipers, they'll look really fine. I've also chopped out that air intake and also thinned out the body, ready for a piece of plastic card to go on the underside of the bonnet, and I'll make a new bonnet air scoop and pop them in nice and flush. So that's that done. I've also removed the little fillets that are in the bottoms of these windows that actually held the fuel fillets, because again, this is a road car, and I think that might have been racing car attribute, and that's not found on the car that I'm actually copying. So I've taken them out completely, so this car won't have those fillers in the back. And I've also put a little bit of filler on the bottom there, again just a couple of air bubbles, nothing very much, quite common on these kits. I put a little bit of filler around this inner arch, and that's really because when I put the spats in, I want a nice hard edge, just put it in there just because. And there's a little tiny little bit of filler on the bottoms of these rear wheel arches, just to sort of finish them off. They were just had a couple of air bubbles in them, so I just put a tiny dot of filler in there, just blended it out. Again, nothing very much. Most people wouldn't even care. It's just me. So I've worked in the industry before making bodies as well, and it's just details like that that I like to just get right before I move on to the next stage. And talking of the next stage is indeed the chassis. Now I need to get the chassis completely built up, because I want to get the whole car on its chassis, on its wheels, at the exact right height and everything, because I want to build in the rear spats, and then I need to go to the painting stage. And I really don't want to be doing any body work after paint work. Sorry, you really don't want to put a finish on this car and then find out that the chassis doesn't fit quite right, or you're not 100% happy with it. That would be a disaster, because you'll end up having to repaint stuff. So I'm going to set the whole car up now in its bare state. Now I want to play around with this chassis slightly, and again, this isn't necessary. This is me again just going the extra 10 miles as I always do. It's not a slur on the model. The model is great. I just want to do this because I'm a glutton for punishment. So what I want to do is fit these carbon fiber rods into this chassis. This is 6mm by 1mm carbon fiber rod, and I want to fit a rod down there, and I want to fit a rod down there, and I want to extend it forwards so it touches the body when you hook it into the body. So I'm going to need to file away this extra bit of plastic here so that this rail can run all the way down, and then I'll rivet it through there, and I'll rivet it through the back there. So I've got two nice carbon fiber rails, and I'll notch the rail around this body mount here, but I'll have to stop it at this point here because the pod is there, and I've fiddled around and there's no way that I can easily get this rail past and all the way down. And see, if I put it there, it interferes with the body mount and I can't go anywhere else. So what I'll do
is obviously, as I just said, I'll put a chassis rail in there and there, rivet it in, and then on the underside, I think I'll cut 2 brass plates, and I run a brass plate down here, and I just round it off nicely, and down here and round it off nicely, and I'll glue it on, and I'll probably pop a rivet in either end. That will strengthen up this back piece, and also with the weight of the car bearing down on those rear mounts, it'll just transfer a little bit of the weight off the rear pod here into the main chassis. Now this piece of body here, or chassis, is just there for the ride. It doesn't do anything, but I would like it to be strong because I don't want it to sort of sag down over time like that. If it's in a hot display case one summer, everything gets warm, I don't want it to sort of take on its own weight and start bending. It's totally unsupported at the moment. It doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't even need to be there, but I think George has put it there because he just finishes off the model nicely. Feels in a little bit of a void, but you know, whatever. I might even put a body post in the back of the body just to support the end of it. That may be what I'll do as well. So that's just me, something that I want to do. And also, once I've got those rails in the front, I've got a little bit of that brass tube that I use for my tuning kits for the Skeletrix cars. I'm going to chop that in half, and I'm going to drill a hole in the side here. I'm going to make it nice and loose. I'm going to put half the tube in each section here, get the front end all set up at the correct ride height, and then epoxy these bits of tube in through the carbon fibre and through this resin chassis, so that my front axle is housed in this brass tube on both sides of the chassis, kind of like that, but with a smaller piece of brass. And that will give the front bearings a really nice bearing, and it will run nice and smooth. This particular piece here is supposed to go in here and hold in the axles, so when all this is done, I'll probably pop that in anyway, just for fun. Right, so with all that explained, I think it's now time to try and get this chassis sorted out so that we can move on to the next stage, which is priming. Just a quick tip here, if you want to work out how long to make your axle when it's full length and needs chopping down, measure the width of the car, give yourself a little allowance. In this case, I'm going to allow 58mm, and then zero your vernier, and then measure the outside of your wheels gently, and that is how long the axle is. In this case, it is 24.5mm. So disassemble your wheels from your axle, measure 24.5mm on your axle, and that's where you need to cut it down. So close up the vernier, zero it out, measure 24mm, in my case at least, out, out, out. Don't have to be too accurate here because you can always come back at a later date, and then you just mark your axle where it is on there. Grab a bit of masking tape, put the masking tape on your mark, which is right there. Double check, and then cut it to length. Okay, so we've got to the stage now where the chassis is basically fitted to the body and the wheels roughly in place, so we know what we're working with. And I reckon that the chassis needs to be lowered by about 1 mil to 1.5 mil. So with that in mind, we can now show you what I've done to this chassis. So if we whip off the wheels. So there we are. So that's the chassis as I finished messing about with it. So as you can see, I've got carbon fibre spars down each side to strengthen up the chassis. And I've also got this brass plate that I've epoxied on and also riveted at 3 points as well. So this plate and this carbon fibre overlap each other by about 3/4 of an inch, which gives you a really great strength overlap. And also the pod is holding the brass down as well. So the back end of this brass is doing absolutely nothing, but whatever it's doing it very strongly indeed. So there's no flex in that worth talking about. And the whole chassis is very, very rigid. Like I say, I don't think any of this is necessary. I just like to do these things because I find it fun. But the chassis in its basic form from George is absolutely fine. I just like to mess around with things and can't leave anything alone as standard. So as you can see, all I need to do to get my wheelbase or my ride height 1.5 millimeters lower is just put 3 packers underneath these 3 points here, about 1.25 mil, and that will lift the pod and lower the chassis. And the front end here, I just need to Dremel a little bit of the material away from the top here on both sides, and that will allow the axle to lift up and lower the car. So there won't be an awful lot of carbon fibre left, but it doesn't really matter. This piece of carbon fibre is just here for fun. This bit at the front is doing absolutely nothing really, and the only reason I've pushed it forwards is just in case the car takes a bump. We've actually got the carbon fibre going all the way to the front of the car, but I don't think there's going to be a wild amount of that carbon fibre left by the time I've removed a little bit more to lower the axle. But what I might do is I might overlay another piece on the outside just a little bit higher up, just to put it all back again, but it's probably not necessary, so maybe I won't bother doing it at all. Right, so let's make these packers, get this chassis all set up on its body, and then I can get these front bearings all glued in when the whole car is in place. Okay, so I better explain what I've just done there, because I threw all my plans out the window because I saw a better opportunity. So once I'd slotted those front holes slightly deeper to drop the front axle, to lift the front axle, to lower the car, I discovered that I could manipulate those tubes into the right place through the front grille, because there's so much space there, and set up the car's ride height. And as you can see, those wheels now are absolutely spot on. So I just settled the car down so that it was absolutely perfect on ride height, and just put glue in through the front of the car on a cocktail stick to just glue those bearings in place. I've also screwed the chassis down as well, so getting everything in exactly the right place. So now what I'm going to do is just unscrew the chassis and sort of go back to what I was going to do, which was just sort of set the front end in epoxy and let the front end dry. So it's going to bung a load of epoxy in there now, and then leave it set, and then we'll come back to it and take it from there. And with those front axle spacers now complete and the axle chopped down another 2.4mm, we have an absolutely perfectly fitting front axle that's very free to turn, has extremely minimal side float, uses George's original front axle holder, albeit glued in as well as screwed in, and we have my brass bushes and also the full length carbon fibre reinforcing. So that's the front end completely done and working really well. So the next thing to do is to fit the guide. Now, fortunately for me, this particular kit comes with a hole that's ever so slightly too small for a Slotting Plus guide, which means it needs reaming out. Now, if you don't have a reaming tool, you could simply pop a file in there maybe, or a 3.6mm drill. However, if you have one of my reaming tools, it's just a very simple case of reaming it like this. And then once it's reamed out, you will find that your Slotting Plus guide fits absolutely perfectly with absolutely no side wobble whatsoever, and it's very free to turn. So that is it. The guide is fitted. So as you see, all I now need to do is just trim a little bit off the height because it's a little bit too tall, and then I can pop in some braids and then set up the right height, making a spacer, and then that is the guide fitted. So let's crack on with that. There we are with the guide all fitted. That completes the front end of the car and for the most part completes the chassis. You can see the spacer in there. I've got a good amount of travel there and a good centering as well. And if you didn't quite see it while I was making it, here's one I made earlier. Very simple. In this particular case, the car is taking a 1mm spacer for a Slotting Plus guide. And if you didn't see earlier on when I was grinding the pod, I took about 0.5mm off the inside of that pod plastic just to get these pendle slot bearings in, and once I'd taken off that thickness they clipped in perfectly and they work absolutely beautifully, as you can see. I've also trimmed all the axles down now so they all fit within the body perfectly. You can see everything is now exactly as it should be, looking very pretty. So I think now we're at the stage where we can take this chassis apart and actually start putting some primer on it and start to neutralize the body and see where we're at with it. So let's get the old sandpaper out and the rubber gloves on, make a little mount for this car so we can hold it with our stand, and then we can get to painting. Okay, and just like that, after a second coat of primer, we've now got a body that's actually ready for colour. Now I'm not going to go straight to colour right now because I actually want to do some extra details to the body, and I really want to get all the work done on this body before it goes to colour. So one of those things is to fit a front bumper. Now I've checked in real life pictures and I do actually need those two front holes to mount the front bumper, so George is 100% right. I'm not going to fill them in because I do need to use them. I also want to fit a rear bumper, so I'm going to need to drill 2 holes in here as well. And again, I'll be handling the body, so I don't want to get any grubby finger marks on my nice fresh paint or damage it. So we're going to be doing the work on the back end as well. You'll also notice there are 2mm holes there that I've drilled out, and that is for a lighting kit later on in this video. So that's all done. And then also I need to mock up and make and fit, probably, I'm not quite sure yet, the grills that go in these rear arches and in the front end as well. And I've got some meshing for that, which is this stuff here. And the sizing is actually 0.45 mil square with 3 mil divisions, and it's come from A1 Models via eBay. It's incredibly fine mesh, etched brass, and that will fit just on the inside there. Now I think this was the size that was used in this original model before I chopped out the actual grill. So basically I'm going to be putting back what was already there, but this time it's going to be actual proper mesh. So we need to do that as well. And again, I'll be handling the body, so I need to do all that before we get to color. So I'll probably fit the bits and bobs that I want to fit on it, give it a quick flat down afterwards just to get rid of all of my fingerprints, possibly dust over with one last coat just to neutralize the surface, and then we can go to color. But first, let's get these bumpers done and get all the messing about with the body finished before we move to color. Okay, I'm just about to put down some 2K clear. This particular system is by Profix, and it's 50% hardener with 10% thinners, and you really must use a very high quality mask when you're laying down 2K because it's extremely poisonous. So between my really good mask and my really powerful spray booth, I'm okay for occasional use, but if you put this stuff down regularly, you really do need a full respirator that's fresh air feed and all the rest of it. But whenever you do 2K, be very careful, read all the safety precautions, and make sure you do it in a vented, at least a very well ventilated area. Okay, so while that all-clad chrome is drying on the body, let's turn our attentions to the interior. Now, as you can see, I've already painted up this interior in its basic colours. So you've got a bit of a red mix going on for the leather seats, a bit of a neutral sort of light brown for the interior, and the top of the dashboard so far is in satin black. I've yet to paint the front in the wood and paint in all the clocks, but that is obviously one of the next jobs. But before we do that, I want to turn my attention to the passengers. Now, this car is actually a racing car derivative, hence the reason why it had the fuel fillers on the back and the straps over the bonnet and so on. And this car was actually driven to racetracks in a civilian guise, turned into a race car and then raced and then driven away as a civilian car. So this particular car, although it's got a racing driver with it, can actually be and was actually driven in a civilian manner, and that's what I want to do with my car, hence the reason why I've taken off all the racing attributes. I want to have it as a civilian car. So this is a perfectly good driver as a race driver. He fits in the front seat absolutely fine, no problems at all, but he does have a racing helmet on. Now, what I would like to do is I would like period correct figures in this car of the 1940s, 1950s, and I think this figure with his lovely hat is spot on, and this lady with her lovely hat and all her garments are absolutely spot on. Now, these figures are actually made by a guy on eBay called 3D Jason, and he does a wonderful range of 3D printed figures in all scales. These ones are actually 32, obviously, but they're basically based on World War II scenarios. So these particular figures, this one here rather, is from the Inspector range. There's a range of 5 figures in that set. There's 2 inspectors and some German soldiers. But this guy is straight out the 40s. Absolutely perfect in his attire. So he will be really good as the driver. And as you can see, his arm is already kind of in the right place. So my thinking is, if I was to cut the arm at the shoulder there and just bend it up, I could probably get that arm to touch the bottom of the steering wheel. And this arm here could be taken off completely and replaced with the arm from the kit for the arm on the other side. And then I can chop him off at his waist and sort of expose his legs, because his legs are actually very well defined underneath his coat. And I'm wondering if I can get his legs to come forwards in the same style as this one, possibly with his bit of coat as well. So between these two figures, I think I could do a really nice period correct driver with his hat and all the rest of it. Really nice quality driver. I may even break his head off and just square his head up, because he's got a little bit of a tilt to his head, which I really want to sort of straighten up. But that's no problem. Just break his head off, put a bit of filler in there and straighten his head up. But I think I could make a decent period correct driver out of this driver here, with his lovely tie and all his lovely garments on there. I think he'd make a superb driving figure. And then the passenger, this lady here is from the Evacuees set. Now she's supposed to have a couple of kids with her and another young girl and so on. But this, the 3D Jason was happy to sell me just the two figures that I wanted from the sets that I wanted. I had to buy 5 as a set, and then he refunded me on the 3. But he's also good enough to give me these extra ones as well. So thank you very much for that. And I'm going to use these as static figures in another build, because I do have another period build coming up at some point, and these figures will be superb with that build. But back to this build. So this lady here, I think I'll be able to chop her off at the waist, possibly break her arm at her elbow and move her arm up a little bit to sort of bring the hand more sort of on top, and then move this arm again, break him up and bring him across so he looks like she's kind of got her arm sort of on her lap, and then maybe do something with her dress so that the dress comes forwards a little bit. And I think she would fit really, really nicely in the interior with a nice period correct hat and everything else, and paint her in some nice colors and paint him in his nice browns and so on. And I think these two people as a driver and passenger with a little bit of modification will be superb. So don't forget, if you want period correct 1940s figures, 3D Jason is your man. Now I know not all the figures are really going to work from a World War II scenario, but in the case of this one, they will with a little bit of work. You never know, if you ask him nicely, he may even be able to conjure up some drivers or something else. But the quality of his work is absolutely spot on. I think you'll agree. I haven't actually found any figures yet that are better than these, to be honest. They are absolutely bang on. So 3D Jason's your man. See if there's anything in this range that will suit your build. So with that all said, let's get these figures all chopped up and see if we can get them in this cockpit. Okay, so before I go too far, I think it might be worth documenting where I got with these figures from the originals. So here is the original figure here. And here is the man that I've done so far. As you can see, I've squared up his head and I've added in an extra arm, and I've moved this arm here so it's a bit more in position, and I've chopped up his legs to give some sort of semblance of feet. So there we are. So that's him. And this original driver's arm was donated and given to our new driver, and then slightly reprofiled to take away some of the puffiness that the original driver one had. So that's the driver done, and then the lady is here. So as you can see, I've completely moved her head in a different position, moved her arm on the side, and also moved her arm on the other side, and chopped around her dress so that her dress is now kind of on her lap. So she's got two arms there sitting on her lap, and inside the car they look very similar, in fact, if not exactly the same as that. So there we are. They're absolutely spot on. I've checked them in the car and they all fit great, and that's job done pretty much. So the next job now is just to get these figures primed and then painted up and then made a permanent part of our interior. Okay, so after a little bit of painting and general modeling, we now have an interior that's fully painted and ready to go in the car. And I think those figures look very respectable, to be honest. And we got a little bit of a dashboard there with a bit of wood grain effect. I've tried to get a wood grain effect on there. Clocks are all picked out. Steering wheel's got some sort of wood grain effect on it. A little bit of lacquer on the steering wheel to make it a little bit shiny. And then we obviously got the man in his nice brown suit. And we got the lady in a nice blue dress with a little hat on and a little purple band. I think it's all come out quite respectable. I think they look quite period and correct. Right, so now the interior is finished. Let's crack on and paint the chassis satin black, and then we can start final assembly.
Oh my, what a beautiful car this is. Now, as you saw from that track run, I didn't push it. I didn't want to push it. I never intended to push it. This car was never intended to be a racing car in my eyes. It was always intended to be a very, very pretty car, just a cruiser. And that's what I built it to be. And that's why I didn't push it around the track. But I can assure you, this car is a beautiful driving car. Now, I've got to admit, I've done the track run for this, and I've just done a track run for another video. And there couldn't be more difference between the two cars that I've just run. The car that I've run that you'll see soon enough is awful, absolutely dreadful. This one is the absolute polar opposite. This is smooth, quiet. It's just a joy to drive. It's a very, very, very nice model indeed. Now, sometimes a model gets held up being made, and this was one of those cars. Videos kept on getting in the way, and this kept on being put back and put back and put back. So sorry, George, but it's taken a couple of months to get this car actually finished because of all the other projects. But it was so worth the wait. I cannot believe how nice this car is. Now, obviously, having edited this video, the car looks great in the video, but it doesn't look a patch in real life. It's beautiful in real life. The colour absolutely pops, and the whole ambience of the car is just beautiful. Just driving the car around the track, it handles extremely well. Now, I haven't run it flat out, not really felt the need to, but it just goes around the track so beautifully. It's very, very nicely balanced, very quiet, very smooth, and very stable. Like I said, I haven't pushed it hard. I don't know what it's like on the edge of performance. Don't want to do it. But just going around the track, it's just absolutely beautiful and a real joy. It's a little bit heavier. I think it's around about 130 grams. I haven't actually really weighed it, not properly. I've weighed it here and there. It's about 130 grams, but it just moves so beautifully. Maybe that extra weight just gives it that elegance of just cruising around. It's just so nice to drive. I can't keep saying that. Anyway, so this has been the George Turner Embiricos Bentley. So I hope you've enjoyed watching me build it as much as I've actually enjoyed building it, and definitely the end product. So if you're interested in George's models, he's got a very, very good website. Link just here and down below. And don't forget, he also makes these internal trays as well. And if you want a box for it, then they're a couple of quid on eBay. So I hope you've enjoyed this 200th video. And if you have, maybe you'll subscribe. And if you could hit the little bell button, that would be awesome. So until the next time, thank you very much.